More than 3 agonizing weeks passed. Over 400 federal agents and local deputies kept desperately searching for missing Nancy Guthrie. Tens of thousands of tips poured in. Helicopters circled high above. Cadaver dogs scoured the brutal Sonoran desert. Advanced Bluetooth signals desperately tried pinging the very pacemaker keeping her heart beating. Teams even crossed into Mexico. Every single neighborhood door was knocked on. DNA ran through the massive federal database of the FBI. 19 million profiles scanned. They deployed the exact genetic genealogy technology that finally caught the Golden State Killer. After all that effort, the system failed. They had 0 names. Someone did. Enter criminal profiler Jim Fitzgerald, the brilliant mastermind who helped crack the notorious Unabomber case. He sat down with journalists, revealing exactly who he believes brutally abducted Nancy. What he said completely upends this entire case. It explains everything, making absolutely 0 sense from the start. Who is Jim Fitzgerald? Before hearing his theories about Nancy, you must understand why his words matter more than anything else in this investigation. That was the first mistake. Jim Fitzgerald is absolutely not chasing media attention. He isn't some retired cop giving hot takes. He orchestrated the most complex profiling operation in FBI history. The hunt for Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. For those unaware, this absolute phantom operated freely for 17 years. He mailed deadly bombs. They killed 3 people and injured 23 others across 2 decades. The FBI had absolutely nothing. A profile forged from tiny writing fragments and bizarre behavior, matched against a population of millions. Fitzgerald belonged to the elite behavioral analysis unit that broke it. He dissected the Unabomber manifesto, the writing, the phrasing, the bizarre sentence structures. Evidence suggested this monster was a brilliant academic, an intellectual whose language originated from a highly specific world. That profile ultimately identified Ted Kaczynski after his brother recognized the terrifying writing and called authorities. Fitzgerald spent decades in that behavioral analysis unit. After that triumph, he profiled ruthless kidnappers and serial killers. He built psychological models for how monsters think before striking, how they hide afterward. So, when Brian Anton, a highly credentialed journalist here, sat down and formally questioned Fitzgerald about Nancy Guthrie, this was never wild speculation. The dread was building. This was a master applying the exact same Unabomber methodology to the raw behavioral evidence of an active, highly terrifying kidnapping. When experts dive deep into these dark types of behavioral characteristics, it isn't just a simple psychological profile. They break it all down. They look deep into the pre-offense behavior, then the post-offense behavior. Fitzgerald tells everyone following this case to deeply study the footage. Look closely at the attacker's size, the shape, the dark clothing. Combine everything discussed with these historically proven psychological traits. Evidence suggested these methods possess an incredibly high success rate. Going back 25 years, legends like John Douglas and Bob Ressler paved the way. We withhold the truth, sometimes. These pioneers hunted monsters long before Fitzgerald even joined the legendary behavioral unit. And this is exactly what these predators do. They interviewed incarcerated serial offenders. They know exactly how these phantoms behave. They interviewed the guilty long after the cell doors slammed. During intense interrogations right after their initial arrests, these broken killers handed over their darkest secrets. The central mystery echoed through their words. Let's start with pre-offense behavior. The brutal kidnapping happened early Sunday morning, February 2nd. Time ticked. So investigators focus on the week prior. But honestly, that dark planning phase could extend longer, or shorter. If you live near this suspect, a neighbor, a son, a quiet coworker, here are the exact terrifying features you would notice before the crime. They become unusually distracted, completely aloof, inordinately busy with secret tasks, busy for utterly unclear reasons, deeply self-absorbed, spending massive amounts of time online, searching for highly unusual, disturbing factors. Maybe researching Nancy Guthrie, maybe looking into other past kidnappings, purchasing incredibly odd materials. We have all watched the chilling video. We know the supplies. Perhaps sudden financial issues arose, real or entirely imagined. Evidence suggested a deeply twisted for-profit motivation here. Keep that dark possibility firmly in your mind. He would absolutely possess an abduction kit. Fitzgerald literally circled that exact phrase in his notes, much like the ominous backpack seen in the security footage. Serial predators carry assault kits. Serial killers hold murder supplies. This was a dedicated abduction kit. You can imagine the horrifying common-sense tools hidden inside. You simply would not see a normal person carrying a bag filled with these terrifying items on an everyday basis. The nightmare stash could easily hide inside a basic box. Or a bowling bag? The notorious BTK killer, Dennis Rader, hid his horror in a bowling bag. All these sick items. Obviously different varieties of tape. Heavy duct tape, electrical tape, featureless masks, brutal physical restraints, rope, wire, precision tools. Evidence suggested he packed a highly distinctive miniature flashlight, but that was just the beginning. Investigators call it a bite light, found alongside a hauntingly specific kit of terror, but nobody knew yet. Let us look closely at pre-offense behavior. The behavioral profile points toward a severe fixation. He stalked from afar, hoarding dark fantasies about prominent female celebrities. Savannah Guthrie was undoubtedly sitting right at the absolute top of that twisted list. But that was the first mistake. The stalking element suggested a broader web of obsession, meaning he likely hunted other prominent women in the shadows. Savannah remained unreachable, so he pivoted. He targeted her mother instead, leveraging his chilling, intimate familiarity with the dusty streets of Tucson, Arizona. Profilers divided his post-crime unraveling into two parts. Phase 1 covered the terrifying window before the footage leaked. That critical first week following the abduction, right before the broadcast. Then came the devastating aftermath. Evidence suggested erratic shifts in his daily routine during that agonizing limbo before the video release. A sudden, violent disruption of absolute normalcy. The long, quiet weekend of January 30th through February first became a profound, unexplainable black hole. His entire schedule fractured completely. He vanished from his usual haunts, suddenly anchoring himself in strange, isolated locations. He skipped work entirely, ignored his family obligations, roamed the desolate streets during the dead of night. He claimed vague out-of-town trips, inexplicably driving a rental car to cover his tracks. Severe sleep deprivation warped his mind, exposing immense mental strain. Drugs and alcohol heavily fueled his paranoia. He over-explained his daily whereabouts, desperate to establish unprompted, airtight alibis. Police sirens made him flinch. He scrubbed the interior of his vehicle with obsessive, manic, and terrifying repetition. He incinerated gloves and clothing, deep-cleaned his garage. Hard drives and digital storage devices went straight into the roaring fire. Every veteran investigator studying serial offenders has witnessed this exact psychological breakdown over the passing decades. They always rely on these specific, frantic rituals to bury the ugly truth after committing unspeakable acts. The intense media glare breaks them, but nobody knew yet just how completely he would unravel once the footage finally hit the airwaves. Multiply every single erratic behavior I just mentioned by a factor of 10. He thought he was untouchable. He believed the Nest camera lacked a paid subscription, assuming his dark operation was completely invisible. That catastrophic miscalculation shattered his fragile psyche. The footage eventually dropped anyway, broadcasting a crystal-clear image of his clothing to millions. Panic set in. He grew dangerously unstable, wildly frenetic, and consumed by crippling, unending nerves. Highly combustible. He paced relentlessly, exhibiting a level of physical agitation that dwarfed the horrors of the previous week. He altered his disguise, shaved his head, grew a mustache. He inhaled the news coverage with a terrifying, absolute obsession. He scoured the internet for case updates, desperate to see if the suspect description finally matched his own reflection. He was undoubtedly watching Brian on television, consuming every digital podcast, and lurking inside true crime Facebook groups while we searched for a ghost. He likely manipulated the authorities, flooding the active tip lines with carefully crafted, deceptive lies. He seeded wild theories online. He pushed the case into casual conversations, studying people's faces to gauge their horrified reactions. Some predictions landed flawlessly, others missed the mark. But a man spiraling completely out of control leaves undeniable, glaring footprints behind. Yet, analyzing every single piece of behavioral evidence I just laid out reveals a deeply terrifying truth. If someone in your inner circle matches even 3/4 of this dark profile, you are sleeping next to a monster. Trust your gut, and call the FBI tip line immediately. You might save a life and claim the $200,000 reward. And if you are entirely wrong, the authorities will understand. The profiler flatly refused to hedge his bets. Fitzgerald mapped the predator's mind. He decoded his thoughts before Nancy was taken and exposed his current panic 3 agonizing weeks later. But he withheld one key detail until the very end, the single most consequential element of the entire psychological profile. Nancy Guthrie was an innocent, beloved mother. She was merely a pawn, violently snatched because of the unimaginable fame of her daughter. The Fitzgerald profile shattered all remaining illusions. This living nightmare was never random. The details matter immensely. According to Jim Fitzgerald's interview with Brian Enton, this was never a botched burglary or a simple crime of opportunity. Fitzgerald dissected the behavioral evidence with cold, surgical precision. He looked beyond what happened, focusing entirely on the how. The methodology proved this devastating operation was meticulously orchestrated in advance. Planning indicator number 1, the chilling, methodical art of the casing. ABC News and CNN confirmed a terrifying truth from trusted investigative sources. The predator stalked Nancy Guthrie's front porch at least one night prior. He stood in the dark, stared directly into the lens. He calculated the layout, then vanished into the night, quietly studying his prey. The Pima County Sheriff's Department publicly stated that specific timelines remain unverified, but evidence suggested the absolute worst was yet to come. Officials claimed those released photographs lacked a timestamp entirely, adding that any theory putting the suspect there on separate nights was purely speculative. Multiple media outlets shouted this detail from the rooftops. Law enforcement simply refused to confirm it. Yet if true, it shatters the entire timeline and becomes the single most chilling clue. We will circle back. Let us look at the backpack. The intruder arrived on the morning of February, first hauling heavy gear. What was hiding inside? The contents remain a mystery, but nobody brings a tactical bag to a kidnapping empty-handed. Restraints, zip ties, duct tape. Whatever sinister tools he packed, evidence suggested careful premeditation. Next up, the camera. The moment this predator crept onto Nancy's porch, he went straight for her smart doorbell. That was his first mistake. He desperately tried ripping it down, eventually shoving a nearby potted plant right over the lens. The feed died at exactly 1:47 in the morning. An amateur ignores security systems. A professional neutralizes them. Which brings us to the next deeply disturbing clues. The mask, the dark gloves, a holstered firearm with highly unusual characteristics, according to the sheriff. A heavily armed ghost showed up at an 84-year-old woman's doorstep, equipped with a complete counterforensic, tactical loadout. You never grab a mask as an afterthought. Fitzgerald made a truly chilling observation. An 84-year-old widow living entirely alone is not a high-threat target requiring this terrifying level of operational precision. She was tiny, elderly, alone. Evidence suggested you only execute an operation with this terrifying precision when the ultimate prize massively outweighs the actual victim. And if Fitzgerald is correct, the underlying motive here is almost too massive to comprehend. Because Nancy is not just some random 84-year-old Tucson resident. She raised Savannah Guthrie, the famous national television anchor, and arguably one of the most visible faces in American media. Fitzgerald delivered a haunting conclusion during his recent interview. This nightmare was always about extreme leverage, about a ransom. Evidence suggested a predator who honestly believed taking Nancy would absolutely force Savannah's hand. Part of me prays this was an obsessed fan, someone unable to reach the famous daughter directly, yet firmly convinced they shared some deep, cosmic connection. But nobody knew yet. Maybe he just wanted to lock her mother inside a hidden, soundproof room somewhere, endlessly interrogating her about Savannah's early childhood, asking over and over if she would ever truly love him back, targeting Savannah Guthrie directly, not Nancy. In separate interviews, former profiler Fitzgerald raised the terrifying possibility of an obsessive, entirely fantasy-driven motive. A stalker fixated on Savannah personally, keeping Nancy alive simply to maintain psychological control. Ransom demands and dark obsession theories were not mutually exclusive, and Fitzgerald explored both. Consider what that terrifying framing meant for the ongoing investigation. Were investigators hunting for someone with a personal grudge against Nancy herself? A bitter neighbor? A romantic history? Petty family conflict? You were looking in the wrong direction entirely. You needed someone who had been obsessively watching Savannah Guthrie, studying her routines, learning her family structure to pinpoint the person she loved most, who lived alone. That precise profile explained every single behavioral indicator here, including the absolute most chilling new development. Evidence suggested investigators tracked Google searches originating from Arizona. They researched Nancy Guthrie's home address and Savannah Guthrie's exact salary. That was the first mistake. Extensively researching the target and financial prize beforehand. The horrifying truth? He cased it. Let's dive much deeper into the prior night casing detail. It hits the dark heart of the entire profile, bringing crucial caveats completely absent from most mainstream media coverage you will watch. Here is what we know. 2 suspect images outside Nancy's home. One frame shows him at the front door without a backpack. The other? He wore a heavy backpack. Both chilling photos were formally released by the FBI on February 10th. Citing investigative sources, ABC News reported the story first. CNN later separately confirmed these devastating details. Those surveillance photos were captured on 2 entirely different nights. The backpack-free image was actually taken a day prior to the horrific February 1st abduction. The backpack image originated from the exact morning Nancy vanished. If that timeline holds true, it means this. He approached her house once, looked at the camera, assessed the dark scene, then vanished. He went home, he prepared, he returned, armed with a backpack and a plan. Former federal agent Jason Pack gave reporters a chilling theory. A predator was watching. If that figure appeared twice, evidence suggested the monster stalked her long before the actual abduction. Seeing the same phantom twice meant one terrifying reality. They were already hunting, watching the house carefully before stealing her away. This was not a random grab. Evidence suggested cold, calculated staging, a deeply sophisticated operation far beyond a simple crime of opportunity. The predator planned every detail, but nobody knew yet. Then came the twist. The Pima County Sheriff dropped a devastating letter, a crushing blow to the investigation. Those crucial security photos, they lacked verified timestamps. Evidence suggested claiming these surveillance pictures were captured on totally different dates remains pure speculation. Authorities strictly maintain this detail remains completely unverified. Where does that nightmare leave us? Independent police insiders firmly assured ABC News and CNN that this chilling prior nighttime prowl definitely occurred. Yet the agency running this massive investigation claims nothing is officially verified. Strangely, both statements remain entirely true. The absolute truth of this specific detail holds massive weight. Evidence suggested he stalked her home before returning. This completely rewrites the entire psychological and legal framework of this nightmare. If those haunting photographs share the exact same night, and he is right, the core theory of premeditated murder begins crumbling. Yet, the terrifying question of why this monster targeted Nancy Guthrie's specific residence still lingers. Who told them she lived completely alone? How did they memorize her Sunday worship schedule? Or that she watched church live streams with a companion, meaning alarm bells would ring just hours after she inexplicably vanished forever? Gathering such deep knowledge on a quiet citizen demands research. It takes intentionality. A monster hunted her during that 40-minute window. Whatever dark nightmare unfolded inside happened blindingly fast. Review the timeline, because every single minute truly matters. At exactly 1:47 that morning, February 1st, Nancy's smart doorbell camera suddenly dies. The ruthless intruder deliberately severed the feed. That was the precise second he finally struck, at 2:28 in the morning. 41 minutes later, Nancy's internal pacemaker suddenly drops its Bluetooth connection. This crucial medical implant features wireless technology syncing directly to her paired smartphone. The digital tether ran perfectly. At 2:28, it goes black. That internal implant didn't just randomly break down. It dropped the signal because Nancy was forcefully dragged away from her anchored smartphone. They ripped her from that house. In roughly 41 minutes, someone breached the home of an 84-year-old woman, ambushing her, and abducted her away. Evidence suggested zero massive indoor struggles, proving this nightmare was fiercely controlled, blindingly fast, and highly orchestrated. But it wasn't perfectly clean. Fresh blood was discovered smearing Nancy's front porch and the outside siding. DNA analysis later proved that horrifying crimson fluid belonged exclusively to her. Inside that terrifying window, she was brutally injured. The predator relocated her quietly. But nobody knew yet. A loyal friend just waited for Nancy's usual Sunday church stream, totally in vain. Now enters one of the most crucial, critically ignored turning points across this investigation. President Trump openly blasted the search over one specific detail: the announcement that police had launched a specialized helicopter armed with custom Bluetooth tracking technology, explicitly engineered to locate Nancy's pacemaker. Aboard Air Force One, Trump informed journalists, "I truly hated that they bragged about hunting down that pacemaker before they actually started looking for it." He elaborated, "If they truly possessed that tactical capability, the ruthless perpetrator would simply say, 'Well, I am completely unwilling to let that occur. I seriously cannot fathom why they did that.'" Politics completely aside, the core strategic critique here hits the nail flawlessly on the head. That was the first mistake. By loudly boasting to global media outlets that deputies could successfully track Nancy's medical signal, investigators practically handed the cunning kidnapper an evasion manual: disable the tech, obliterate it, or drag her beyond range. Considering the terrifying psychological blueprint established, a phantom devouring every single local media broadcast, prematurely leaking that advanced surveillance tactic was an absolutely catastrophic strategic blunder. Tracking that implant yielded 0 arrests. An apex predator smart enough to stalk this isolated property, cripple the security feed, and arrive wearing dark gloves and masks is undoubtedly cunning enough to pivot when police freely broadcast their playbook nationwide. Aftermath psychology. Now Jim Fitzgerald's psychological assessment turns into pure nightmare fuel. 3 weeks out, society typically pictures a kidnapper shivering in shadows, sweating, and going completely dark. Fitzgerald claims the forensic breadcrumbs actually suggest the exact opposite, not this killer. A monster orchestrating this flawless strike, ruthlessly studying her and preparing gear, striking flawlessly inside a 41-minute blitz, isn't slowly cracking. They are intensely watching. They dissect every single press briefing Sheriff Nanos officially delivers. They ruthlessly devour every crime blog. Fitzgerald chillingly warned they are probably streaming this exact video. Brian Anton actually verified through his personal boots-on-the-ground journalism that the Pima County Sheriff's Office remains bizarrely talkative regarding this mystery, wildly differing from standard major protocols. Anton explicitly linked this bizarre dynamic to the Brian Kohberger massacre in Idaho. Those detectives brutally clamped down for weeks, refusing absolutely everything. But here, this sheriff enthusiastically hosted briefings and endless interviews, freely paraded DNA results, verified fresh bloodstains, freely leaked that pacemaker tracking tech, meticulously detailing the suspect's wardrobe analysis. An ex-FBI profiler went on Anton's broadcast, totally baffled by the sheer avalanche of evidence bleeding into the press. He floated a chilling theory, perhaps they were intentionally signaling the kidnapper. But nobody knew yet. Fitzgerald's observation sliced right to the bone. Who actually wins when a case leaks? Not the detectives. The monster hiding in the shadows benefits. Every broadcasted failure, no genetic hits, lab bottlenecks, hands the predator a perfect map of the blind spots. Over 3 agonizing weeks, that massive wave of intelligence flowed straight to a ghost. Then came the forensic catastrophe. Crime scene tech swabbed Nancy Guthrie's home, lifting unauthorized cellular evidence. It did not belong to a single soul authorized to cross her threshold. This should have broken the mystery. The failure was systematic. 4 distinct nightmares plagued the evidence. Sheriff Nanos admitted to the press that the genetic trace was hopelessly tangled between multiple actors. Before computers can hunt a killer, scientists must isolate those profiles from the noise. It is a grueling procedure that ruins evidence in amateur hands. Specialists informed NBC News untangling this might take months. The second systemic failure hit when the system went completely blind. Federal databases failed. They scanned over 19 million convicted offenders lurking in the federal archives. Absolutely nothing came back to identify him. Evidence suggested an apex predator, a complete ghost to the criminal justice system. The third nightmare unspooled in a Florida laboratory. Desperate detectives shipped the chaotic sample down south for investigative genetic genealogy. They gambled on the exact science that dragged the Golden State Killer into the light. But the sheriff confessed to NBC News that the supposed silver bullet jammed. He hid behind a vague, terrifying word: challenges. In crime labs, that hints at cross-contamination, rotting biological material, or a puzzle so completely broken the pieces won't fit. The facility's top scientist bluntly warned it could take weeks, or perhaps an entire agonizing year. The clock violently ticked. The fourth blow shattered everything. A dark glove was recovered exactly 2 miles from the victim. To the naked eye, it looked identical to the fabric on the chilling doorbell video. They pulled cellular data off it, but in a gut-wrenching twist, it completely contradicted the home's biological footprint. If one monster committed this atrocity, those profiles should mirror perfectly. They clashed completely, suggesting a terrifying reality. A coordinated pack of predators orchestrated the strike, multiplying the dread. Detectives were forced to admit a network of attackers remained possible. That wasn't just a minor detail. It was an earth-shattering pivot in the manhunt. A larger crew creates vulnerabilities, increasing odds someone breaks under the crushing psychological weight of hiding Nancy Guthrie right now. Then came the digital extortion. While scientists spun their wheels, sinister demands flooded channels, painting a highly disturbing picture. The initial psychological warfare hit the traumatized family almost immediately after the abduction. A cold text demanding massive Bitcoin payouts. The first deadline was February 5th, with the financial extortion skyrocketing to an eye-watering $6 million if delayed to February 9th. The local sheriff acknowledged the extortion attempt existed. TMZ claimed they intercepted identical, terror-inducing messages. Broken but defiant, her children launched a public counteroffensive on February 4th. Savannah Guthrie stared directly into the camera lens, alongside her siblings, begging the faceless captor for proof of breathing life. Days slipped away until February 7th, when they released another gut-wrenching clip regarding the money. Savannah surrendered on national television, flatly declaring they would pay. She begged the kidnapper to negotiate the nightmare. That was the first mistake. A second message materialized. One News Nation flagged as deeply calculated dodging Bitcoin entirely for a darker digital currency. The astronomical price tag hovering over her life remained identical. But the central mystery echoed loudly in that financial pivot. Bitcoin leaves traceable footprints. Federal agents have gotten incredibly efficient at unmasking those supposedly anonymous transactions. Privacy coins like Monero, however, are explicitly built to vanish. If that secondary demand was real, evidence suggested the predator watched the news cycle, spotted the trap, and evolved. Authorities refused to validate either demand. No funds traded hands, and the silence remained absolute. Adding pure depravity, federal agents raided a California opportunist in early February for tormenting relatives with fake text messages. It highlighted a brutal, systemic failure. Sick opportunists effortlessly drown out the only voice that actually matters for justice. A police force bleeding from the inside out. Brian Enton practically screamed this angle during his broadcasts, yet mainstream media completely ignored the crisis. The background is buried in bureaucratic red tape, but it holds the absolute key. Enter Sergeant Aaron Cross. He leads the Puma County Deputies Organization, fighting as the union boss for the boots on the ground. 26 years wearing the badge. He was the second most senior sergeant, but nobody knew yet how deep the rot actually went. Going live on Enton's network, Cross painted a grim portrait of a precinct completely paralyzed by internal chaos. The roster was terrifyingly green. Bleeding seasoned detectives, the agency lacked the heavy hitters required to hunt down a predator of this caliber. Hardened veterans were pushing pencils at dusty desks. Meanwhile, the most devastating abduction investigation in America fell on rookies who barely knew the ropes. Fox News reporters dug into the roster and independently verified the systemic failure. The homicide unit hunting Nancy Guthrie's captor relied on investigators with a mere 1 or 2 years on the job. Retaliation was swift. Cross revealed to Enton that his superiors instantly banished him to the purgatory of answering trivial telephone complaints. His exact words carried a heavy sting. "This marks my 26th year in uniform. I sit as the second highest ranking sergeant on this force. Yet the brass chained me to a headset, logging petty grievances. If somebody swipes your sprinkler and you dial the precinct, I am the guy writing it down. But that was the first mistake in taking things purely at face value." Cross and Sheriff Nanos shared a bitter, blood-boiling feud. Their political and legal warfare stretched back for years, long before Nancy ever vanished into the night. Twice, the sergeant dragged his own sheriff into the unforgiving arena of federal court. He even orchestrated a brutal no-confidence vote from the Union in 2024. By October of 2024, Cross found himself suspended for what the brass conveniently labeled rogue political stunts. He spent the entire previous election cycle aggressively trying to unseat Nanos from his throne. Nanos fired back during a public broadcast. Looking straight into the lens, the sheriff declared, "Aaron Cross is lying to you," a direct quote that sent shockwaves through the community. How do we process this venomous rivalry when a beloved mother's life hangs by a thread? You take it as a solitary piece of the puzzle. It comes from an insider carrying a heavily documented grudge against the exact man he is trying to destroy. Yet, the terrifying lack of detective experience remains an undeniable fact. Fox News independently cemented that systemic failure into the public record. The ugly blood feud between Cross and Nanos is crucial context. The public needs the truth before the entire investigation collapses under its own weight. Then, the central mystery deepened. Anton unleashed his own separate bombshells, totally independent from the disgruntled sergeant's claims. Citing terrified whispers from inside the precinct, Anton revealed a staggering level of incompetence. Half the detectives knocking on doors did not even know if the FBI or the Puma County Sheriff actually held the reins. That's sickening level of operational blindness. If those leaks hold true, it is a disaster waiting to happen. We are witnessing a monumental collapse of command, completely detached from one officer's vendetta. The mastermind versus the bumbling fool. This is where the entire manhunt hits a terrifying bottleneck. Two retired federal profilers stared at the exact same chilling evidence. They walked away with two fiercely opposing theories, and the horrific reality is that both might be absolutely correct. Jim Fitzgerald looked at the nightmare and saw cold, calculating premeditation. Every move felt surgically planned. Evidence suggested intense prior stalking. The disabled security lenses, the tactical backpack, the obscuring mask, the carefully chosen gloves. A razor-thin 41-minute window to strike. Fitzgerald saw a phantom who studied his prey in the dark, preparing for the perfect moment to shatter her world. But then you have former federal agent Jeff Cortez. Broadcasting on that same network, Cortez watched the grainy shadows dance across the screen. He studied the predator's gait and saw something entirely different. The suspect stumbled. He lacked the fluid grace of a seasoned killer, leading Cortez to label the phantom a dangerous novice. But he was a very specific breed of monster. Evidence suggested he absorbed his forensic countermeasures by binging dark documentaries late at night. He consumed countless podcast episodes and studied the gruesome mistakes of convicted killers. Let the terrifying weight of that reality sink in. We exist in a twisted culture where investigative tactics serve as casual weekend entertainment. Millions of ordinary citizens now understand the intricate science of DNA extraction. They know exactly how to blind a digital doorbell. They understand the limitations of federal databases, tracking the undeniable digital footprints of Bitcoin while hiding behind the dark veil of Monero. They know why a single stray fiber or a bare fingerprint seals a coffin. This armchair criminal consumed enough media to evade the basic traps. Yet, underneath the tactical gear, he lacked the ice-cold discipline required to pull off the perfect crime without leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. Because he definitely slipped up. Drops of crimson stained the front porch. A discarded glove sat miles away. Genetic material lingered in the hallway, and digital lenses caught 2 consecutive nights of stalking. Here is where both federal legends meet in the middle. The monster orchestrated the abduction well enough to vanish into thin air, but his armor has fatal cracks. Those critical errors are currently sitting under microscopes in a Florida laboratory. They are hiding in the pixelated shadows of the recovered hard drives. The fatal slip hides somewhere within an ocean of desperate civilian tips. Can this fractured police force connect the dots before the trail freezes over completely? We have to circle back to Fitzgerald's most haunting revelation. He claimed, "Whoever did this targeted Nancy because of her daughter. If the forensic behavioral evidence proves that theory, Nancy Guthrie was never a random target, and the true horror is only just beginning. Captives are leverage, and leverage dies the exact second they stop breathing." Demands dropped. The family desperately agreed to pay. Meanwhile, the Bureau dangled over $100,000 for one solid lead. Even Savannah Guthrie, typically the most unshakable anchor in modern broadcast journalism. She abandoned her desk, skipped the Winter Olympics, and broke down on live television, begging a phantom for her mother's life. 3 agonizing weeks vanished. Crucial DNA stalled in a backlogged lab. The predator stayed nameless. And the department in charge? Their fractured internal command just became a humiliating national spectacle. Careless leaks armed the kidnapper, and that was the first mistake. Quietly, officials prepared to slash the manhunt from 400 agents to a skeleton crew. The golden hour died without a break. Enter Jim Fitzgerald, a man who has built hundreds of behavioral blueprints. He has watched these nightmares end in quiet reunions. He has also unearthed shallow graves. His grim warning to Brian Anton wasn't mere guesswork. This was decades of behavioral science colliding with a deeply terrifying, highly active crime scene. His profile revealed a chilling truth. As evidence suggested, this predator targeted Nancy intentionally, meticulously stalking her. They are monitoring the manhunt live. Over 3 weeks later, this phantom firmly believes they hold every single card. Catching the architect of this nightmare isn't the real mystery anymore, but nobody knew yet. Forensic genealogy rarely misses once viable samples hit the databases. The true dread is whether Nancy can outlast the agonizing crawl of science. Nancy Ellen Guthrie, 84 years old, 5 feet 5 inches, 150 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes. She relies on a pacemaker. Without her daily cardiac pills, her system faces imminent failure. She vanished the evening of January 31st, 2026, from the Catalina foothills. If you hold a clue, tangible, actionable proof, don't wait. Dial 1-800-CALL-FBI or alert the Pima County Sheriff at 520-3514900. Over $200,000 waits for anyone who brings this grandmother home alive. Spread this everywhere, because someone out there harbors a very dark secret. In our modern world, we often wrap ourselves in a fragile sense of security. We install smart doorbells, settle into quiet neighborhoods, and trust that our loved ones are safe behind locked doors. But the chilling reality of Nancy Guthrie's abduction shatters that illusion completely. It forces us to confront a terrifying truth. Predators don't just lurk in dark alleys. They hide in plain sight. They study our daily routines, consume our digital footprints, and wait patiently for the perfect 40-minute window to tear our lives apart. The ultimate takeaway from this nightmare goes far beyond a single tragic case. It is a desperate, urgent plea for community vigilance. We have to fiercely protect our most vulnerable, our elderly parents, our grandparents, and our neighbors who live alone. Check on them. Pay attention to the shadows outside their windows. Never let the convenience of modern technology replace the absolute necessity of human watchfulness. If you notice a strange vehicle or an unfamiliar face lingering a little too long, trust your gut and speak up. Your courage could be the only shield standing between an innocent family and a lifetime of unimaginable grief. Thank you so much for watching and seeking the answers with us here at Beneath Crimson Truth. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video everywhere to keep the search for Nancy alive. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and drop a comment below. What steps do you take to protect the people you love most?